here. And we want to be on time because at least one of our speakers has a meeting with the cabinet secretary, so we've got to get this going. All right. And this is, I'm probably sure, a problem across the board today. We have with us Chris Kraft, who is Deputy CTO, AI Emerging Technology at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Welcome, Chris. And we also have Dr. Mike Horton, who's Chief AI Officer, Deputy Chief Data Officer at the U.S. Department of Transportation. Thank you very much. We also have Spence Green here, CEO of LILT. Hi, Spence.
Hi, everyone.
And we have Vijay Singh, Chief AI Officer, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. You notice we didn't divulge who has that meeting with the secretary, but because we want to keep that safely secret. But now we are ready from the shortest networking break we will have to welcome back David Matheson to host the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Come on up. Yes. Thank you, Sri, and thanks everybody. I know there was so much amazing conversation going on right there, and I know you all have a lot of questions that you'd like to ask our guests. We'll make it up to you at lunch. And
David, before we do that, can
yes,
I just point out that those of you who are staying at the hotel know this, at noon there will be a 90-second fire alarm and test that is not aimed at us. It is aimed at the staff. So they don't want us to exit, don't want us to scramble or any of those things. But to our military friends here, don't scramble any jets or anything else. This is just a test and only 90 seconds at noon. So just.
I don't want to scare anyone with a fire alarm. Everything else. Great, thanks everybody. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much, and appreciate we're back on track now. So we're just going to start with quick intros. Why don't we start with Spence?
Hi everyone. I'm Spence Green. I'm the CEO of LILT, and we build an end-to-end AI solution for language translation, training conversational AI models in other languages. And our work, it's a dual-use product. We work with companies like Intel and Bloomberg in the private sector, and in the public sector, we work in intelligence, counterintelligence, law enforcement, citizen experience across DoD, IC, and commerce and DOJ.
Fascinating, impressive too, especially with urgent messaging that needs to go out in different languages, translations. Unbelievable what LILT is working on. Chris, glad to have you here.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, I'm Chris Kraft. I'm the Deputy CTO for AI and Emerging Technology at DHS. I think we're doing a lot of very interesting things at DHS. We've got some interesting generative AI pilots that we'll talk about. We've got leveraging commercial generative AI across the department. We've been really, I think, leading in that space. Another thing that I've been focused on is co-chairing the White House CAIO Council Generative AI Working Group and engaging with a lot of agencies across the federal space and learning about what they're doing. So thank you.
And one of the most prolific posters on LinkedIn with regard to what's happening with AI in federal agencies and government. Make sure you follow Chris on LinkedIn and like, comment, share his posts. It's fantastic for you, keeping us all up to date. Thanks for all your work, Chris. Dr. Mike, welcome.
Hey, how you doing?
Great.
Mike Horton over at Department of Transportation. I'm the Acting Chief AI Officer. I'm at the baby department compared to these two over here. So we're really focused on infrastructure, building out a way to accelerate AI within the organization to be able to track and monitor risk management within those processes and capabilities, and being able to share those models, also bringing in models and sharing them out along with custom code and those types of things to the public.
And congratulations on your recent appointment as Chief AI Officer. He was originally scheduled to speak at the CDAO Summit, and then he had to cancel. And I said, well, wait a minute, now you're a CAIO. So welcome to the team. Vinay, welcome.
Thank you. Vinay Singh, Chief AI Officer, but also Chief Financial Officer. I say that only because it brings a unique perspective from having kind of being the fiscal steward, as well as, keeping the public trust inside of the CFO shop. We have customer experience as well. We have Office of the Chief Risk Officer. So all these elements, interestingly enough, once I took on the AI title, kind of converged. But for us, our priority is people first. It is AI literacy, and we'll talk about more of that as we go.
Fantastic, and you're kind enough to provide us with some handouts. We're going to put those on the tables at lunch and some business cards as well. So thank you for that, sir.
I just want to say that's unfair because we're looking for money all the time. You got both in the same shop. That's
No. Hold on. If you say that, I have to say the point I always make, and my acting CIO is here. As a civil service agency, we have not been playing in this space or any emerging technologies because this is an unfunded mandate. But for decades, even HUD and technology and the challenges we've had have made it difficult. But the reason as CFO I even got involved in this is because I looked at leapfrogging, targeted approaches. We heard earlier today about procurement challenges. And so that's the interest and kind of what swayed me over to this. So there's no money.
Oh, that's not right.
And thank you also, Vinay. You were, I think, the only CAIO in government who came to our world's first ever Chief AI Officer Summit in Boston at Northeastern. So thank you so much for being so proactive about this. Let's start with Chris. Let's get rolling. I mean, DHS, you've got like 3 or more Gen AI pilots. Maybe we could get a little bit of understanding of what you all are working on.
Sure. So I'll start. I'll talk about the 3 generative AI pilots that we have that came out that were announced under our AI roadmap. But before I talk about that, I want to talk about the first generative AI solution at DHS that we put into production, which was one that I led the development for when I was at FEMA. So this solution was one that Vinay, actually I've talked to Vinay a lot about this one, but it's in the CFO organization. And what we did is we took budget information and we loaded that into a generative AI tool so that you could ask questions about the budget. And anyone that's ever looked at a congressional budget justification document knows that they are not the easiest things to navigate. So the one at FEMA was 500 pages long and had tons of information in it. So the idea is that we load it into a generative AI solution, chunk it up, embed it, which put it into a numerical format so we can do amazing search on the parts of the document, surface up answers to questions, and then when we get an external question, and FEMA gets 15 external questions a day on their budget that take thousands of hours a year to answer, and they also pull people away from the mission. So right now at FEMA, and I'm no longer at FEMA, but if you just read the news, they're very focused on disaster response, and that's where they should be. And when a budget question comes up, we want to make it easier so for them to have something to start with and then iterate on that, but really streamline that process. So I think that was a great use case. We started really on shortly after ChatGPT came out, and we're really one of the first, I think, across the federal sector to deploy into production. So that solution's been in production since March of this year. And I think there's also been a lot of great lessons learned. I love that use case because I think it's low risk. It's an easy way to demonstrate value and to get people comfortable with the idea of using generative AI. And then you can move up to something that's a little bit maybe higher profile and gets closer and closer to supporting external stakeholders. So after this was deployed into production, it's now led to, I think, 4 or 5 other chatbot type solutions that are really directly spawning off of that first one. And then just to touch on, if I have another second, to touch on 3 generative AI pilots that we have under our AI roadmap. One is with USCIS, Citizenship and Immigration, that is really interesting, that helps train officers when they interact with refugees and asylum seekers, and we'll probably touch more on that later. The second one is with our Homeland Security investigations, and that stores millions of records of investigation to surface information when agents are looking for information across cases. I sat in with the agents as they were testing that, and they were saying things like, this is highlighting needles in a haystack that I can't find anywhere else. So I think it's a really powerful example of how generative AI and searching can really help. And then the last one is another one at FEMA that we can talk about more later on if it makes sense.
And are you looking at it like language translation? Obviously, at DHS, is that important as well?
Yeah, Spence and I were just talking about that, and I think language translation, it's a natural, on the one hand, it's probably separate and distinct from what we're looking at with generative AI, but I think it's a natural outgrowth as well, because you just go into ChatGPT and you ask it to translate whatever questions that you have and the responses into any number of languages. So one of the things that we're looking at is, what are the tools that are available? What would the policy be to leverage those tools? And what are other organizations like the Department of State, what are they doing, and what can we learn? So.
A great segue to Spence. Tell us a little bit about LILT and your work with these government agencies.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, LILT is an end-to-end AI platform, primarily for language translation, but it also has generative capabilities for text, and it also has data set creation for conversational AI models. The core part of the capability and why people really like it in the public sector is because it can do model customization. And so one of the challenges you have, like Chris said, you can do translation in ChatGPT or Google Translate, but oftentimes the content types and the use cases that you have in the public sector, particularly in DoD IC on the high side, are very different than commercial use cases. And so you need the ability to customize the model to whatever mission you're working on. And LILT gives you a very convenient and non-technical, no-code way of doing that, which is why people like it a lot. So our use cases span primarily in defense and intelligence. Our problem in the public sector is we don't have enough people who speak Chinese. And so less than 50% of the billets for foreign language analysts across the DoD IC are filled right now, which is a serious national security problem. And it's not like there's some secret cache of 2,000 Chinese speakers that we can clear to TSSCI to go do those missions. So this is a job where we can hire AI to fill that national security gap. In the civilian use cases, it's primarily around citizen experience. So our work with the National Weather Service, there's been this extreme weather from the hurricane the last week or so. Prior to 2022, you could only get weather information on weather.gov in one language. Now you can get 6. And that's actually all AI generated through LILT. And to give an example, there was a mandate following Hurricane Ida. That's where the initial requirement for NOAA came from to provide information in other languages. We were able to procure scale up within 6 months and then expand out from Spanish to 6 other languages within a year. So that's like the fastest adoption and transition that I've seen in the public sector of doing about 5 years of work. And you really only need a little bit of expertise within an agency to scale up. So to get Chinese into production, we found one meteorologist in Flagstaff, Arizona, who trained the model that's now used nationwide for providing weather information in Chinese.
Wow. So for that model customization, obviously quality and alignment with the audience in question, but speed is absolutely critical in these urgent situations.
Right.
Fantastic. Mike, you've done so much now. I know you've just published a report on September 24th. We'd love to hear a little bit more about that. I know it's near and dear to your heart, and it's great. Thank you so much. I've actually pulled that up on your screen there. Is that the right one? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is.
Beautiful.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so
Yeah, I didn't mean to
ignore the
surprise you with
prepared
the
by
PowerPoint,
guy.
but
He
you're all
doesn't
set.
know very much about what's going on. Really what we're trying to do at the Department of Transportation is, and what this compliance memo, it's a memo that all departments had to put out by September 24th on how they're going to comply with OMB Memorandum M2410. Many of you probably know what that is, but how to manage risks within the department, within your AI infrastructure. So what we're trying to do is put together a way to accelerate AI within the department while still managing all of those risks and having eyes on what's going on within all of the AI infrastructure that's there. Very important because prior to this, I mean, I've got a very heavy research arm that's there with a lot of people who have been doing AI type things or machine learning type things that are leading into AI within the department on different infrastructure all over the organization, with different environments. We can't have that. I have to be able to have eyes on what's going on, and I can't allow a developer to have to go through I need to go through a spend plan and ask for money, and then I need to build a dev test prod environment, and only then can I go ahead and get somebody in there. Oh, by the way, the tools don't really work well, so I don't know how to put all of this stuff together. There's a big difference between coding a categorization model in Python and using actual infrastructure with things that are built out within there. So there's a learning curve that's going on there. So what we're trying to do is to accelerate that process where my developer can mature that use case from just an idea all the way through it actually working within the organization. Same thing for my research people and with all the great external research partners that we have, and being able to do that in a secure manner while being able to track what's going on. Also with the vision of what John was saying a little bit in the last piece about being able to evaluate data and models and make sure that that they're compliant. There's no bias, or no bias. All of them will have bias, but being able to see what's going on, see any kind of nefarious things that may be going on in there. But I can't have eyes on if I don't know where it is within my organization. So that's part of the process. More details in what it is in that actual compliance plan. But one of the big things that we're doing is developing enterprise AI capabilities. Mm-hmm. And one of those things is what Chris was talking about with generative AI capabilities generally on the operational side. So when it's something that's going to have great effect to the organization, we want to be able to provide that at the department level where I can update that, get that to be the best it can be with all my experts in that type of functionality, and then just have APIs or other people being able to develop from each of their operating administrations so that they don't have to learn all of this stuff up here, that we can go ahead and provide that functionality and provide those subject matter experts and allow that to accelerate the process. One of the other things is knowledge graphs and being able to do data management that is more conducive to AI functionality and making sure that we have that expertise at the department level. So again, I don't have each of my different modes that are trying different things, that we can consolidate that and collaborate on those things. And Spence gave me another idea as we were talking outside before this on having some translating capabilities. Much of what we do is being a transportation leader throughout the world and being able to provide an AI expert in your language where you're sitting on how to do planning or road development or airports or air traffic control, those types of things. That's what we'd like to be able to do is provide that type of functionality. So that's basically where we are on how we are developing. We're not as far along as a lot of other people are, but we're trying to get that infrastructure to get a handle around what's going on and then be ready to be agile enough to evaluate and repurpose as we're moving forward in this endeavor.
It warms up my heart to know that the convening power of events like this can get these conversations going. And I believe that you and Chris also share the White House Gen AI working group, right? Is that correct? You're both
he's Gen AI. I'm minimum risk management, or I was the co-chair there right. Until they made me the CAIO. Now I can't be on there.
It's so important. Yes, it's so important again to have that collaboration and to be on these groups. And Chris, congrats on that. So Vinay, I know at HUD, your really focus is on coordination and on promoting innovation, and also at the same time managing risk. So give us a little bit of insight in what you're working on there.
Sure. And it was great to release that compliance plan last week. I think it was an action-forcing event to really, over the last year, get the organization focused. Because where this started and where even I saw it, shifting from CFO and then adding the AI piece into it, is this was a change management exercise, right? Any new initiative that comes in, and I've had experience primarily in the private sector, but also in government. And so it was, you know, I joke, but it's true, LLM at HUD is listen and learn, right? Listening and learning mode. It's not large language models yet, and potentially we'll get there. But we've been focused also on, in addition to training our staff, understanding what it is, it's really critical, like every agency, we have, you know, very important missions. And at HUD, for creating strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and quality, affordable homes, the essence of how I view AI is from a sports metaphor of offense, defense, or defense, offense. So protect the mission first, and then potentially amplify the mission. And so when you talk about protecting the mission, it is because our budget dollars don't go directly to the citizen per se, it goes through an ecosystem, local governments, state governments, tribal governments, nonprofits, and industry. We need to understand what those folks may be doing with AI that could impact our mission and the essence of our mission in serving the underserved. So that was a critical component, continues to be, and risk mitigation is at the forefront using the NIST framework and other frameworks, responsible AI frameworks. But then we're looking at that amplifying the mission piece, right? So how can we potentially help our people, our resources, in addition to the citizens and the communities we serve? You know, that is some of the business operational aspects. So we're focused on building that out. The compliance plan teases out in the strategy that will be forthcoming in March in three kind of bucket areas, all centered around data. And I've coded them into acronyms because I'm a CPA and that's what we do to memorize for tests. But you know, the first is PPP, right? People process platforms, changing that from technology to platforms, because I see AI shifting that. And we'll, you know, kind of detail that out. The second is GRC, which all of you know as governance risk compliance. So all those elements that go into that. The compliance plan lays out how we've done so with the governance board and committees. And then the third is IEE, which I call it, which is the innovation, engagement, and experience. And that's where the important piece, reducing barriers to innovation, first time I've seen it come from government, has been a great mandate for us to be able to test, obviously appropriately. Everything we're doing is in draft, in collaboration with our workforce, in collaboration with all the folks that, you know, make critical decisions. But innovation and having kind of building out that design or triage framework is critical. The engagement is critical, and our team in policy, data, and research, led by Solomon Green and Todd Richardson, are going to start rolling out kind of that stakeholder engagement. So going into the communities and hearing from them how this impacts or how we need to not play in certain areas, because bias, discrimination, and all the other guardrails we need to protect are important. And then experience. This is where, I heard earlier panels talk about, and I hear this a lot, government is not industry. So therefore, return on investment, now I'm taking my CFO hat off for a second, return on investment changes really to return on experience. So everything we heard about outcomes, and how do you get to that citizen experience or the community experience, that's where it has to start. And so that's where we put focus on and we're leaning towards.
Thank you so much, Vinay. And I have to come back to Spence because I always, you're working with the intelligence community, Department of Homeland Security. I would think deployment of these models would be extremely time-consuming or difficult. And I just wonder, do people have a hard time making the jump from like the theory of this to the actual application? And especially any sort of tactical uses that you can speak about publicly at such high-profile organizations where, again, speed is of the utmost importance. Can you give us a little background on how do you do that?
Yeah, so I think your question is about what are the sort of barriers to operationalizing and deploying. Right. I think there are really two. The first is infrastructure. The availability of cloud infrastructure, and particularly GPUs, is varied across the federal enterprise. They're, like our weather service customer, they're completely on cloud, and that deployment was very straightforward. Whereas some of our intelligence community customers, they may have GovCloud, but their access to computing infrastructure is somewhat limited. I think that's changing pretty rapidly. It's changed in the last year or two, but that's usually the first issue. We offer a multi-cloud deployment, so you can deploy in any of the major cloud providers or on-prem and unmanaged infrastructure. And that helps the customers, we can meet them where they are. But that's taken a long time to build that. It was a significant investment on our part to be able to support that. The other thing that I think is the biggest challenge is procurement. I spend
We talked about that at the last panel.
Right. I spend most of my time in DC working on procurement.
Wow.
And I think, it's like, what's the federal budget, like $3.8 trillion, but nobody seems to have any money. And I think, my sort of observation on this is that the perspective on technology is still across a lot of agencies the way it was in the corporate world 20 years ago, where it's viewed as IT, which is a cost to be minimized, rather than as a as a lever to amplify what people are doing. And again, I think that is changing, but I think the difficulty of getting software procurement versus atoms and bodies is still a real challenge across most of the agencies.
Yeah, and Chris, in your view, having that view on the CAIO Council Gen AI Working Group, does this reflect what you're seeing as well? The challenges at different agencies having different cloud infrastructure, data readiness, et cetera.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, is that really a challenge or is it an opportunity? Right. Is it, I think that I would outside of my work on that, in that group, when I talk to people, it's, my recommendation is typically, what tools do you have and how can you leverage those tools? If you're gonna talk to me about trying to bring something that you've never used into your agency, I'll refer you to Spence and you can tell them how hard it is to buy something in the federal government and get it through an ATO and get it through the whole process. It's really challenging, and I think it's particularly important with generative AI and where we are now is that I think it's really important to try something and to prototype and to show the capability across your organization and to your leadership. And when we first developed our solution at FEMA, the first thing I would ask people is, have you ever used ChatGPT? And initially I thought everybody has, so they're just gonna say yes, and that was not the case. And the higher up you went in the organization, it was less likely that actually people would say yes. And so, again, I think that's an opportunity, and once people see the power of generative AI, especially on your own data. So it's one thing to go out to ChatGPT and speak like a pirate and write a poem and tell me about, the University of Maryland or whatever. Like, that's very cool. But then if I can load in my own document in an internal and secure way and start asking questions and then start probing on those questions, that's amazing. And and I think there's a lot of opportunity for efficiency and productivity and to build off of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I see Mike and Vinay shaking their heads in agreement. Anything to jump in on that?
No, I think having the framework to be able to do that. I mean, our compliance plan talks about how our acting CIO, Sarah Jazz, who's in the audience, and her team, great partners in this, in creating a couple sandboxes, protecting our data, but being able to experiment. I mean, that's the key, to get people to understand what the potential impacts, but then, put the right guardrails.
Sure. Mike?
And I think it's really important to understand that most people don't really know what AI is and what it can do. So the big question is, I want to do AI, but what can it do? Like, can you tell me what that kind of stuff is? So having the process and procedures to be able to bring in people like Spence, get the ideas flowing, because people are really the focus of how this thing gets done. Let me show you what can be done. Let me show you some use cases. And we actually have an AI support and collaboration center that helps to educate and do that collaboration and inspire people so that they can get that information and come up with the use cases that will be most effective in the organization, and then allow them to collaborate with people who know something about that. Yeah. So you may know what you want to do, but you have no idea of how to get it there. So those are the types of things that we're trying to get, and also probably the biggest thing is AI ain't free. So You know, people think it's like Microsoft 365. I can go ahead and just buy that thing and we can use it all that you want. I'm like, man, that is not what we're talking about here. So give me a budget. How much do you need? Depends on what you want to do. I just want to do AI stuff. It's like, that's nice. So, you know, being able to figure all of that piece out, and most importantly, for those of us in these organizations that I don't think a lot of people understand, in order for me to be able to do this effectively, I got to be able to cost allocate what's going on within the AI. Yeah. So I can't just turn it on. I got to figure out who I got to charge back for what it is that you're doing, and I got to be able to tell the people with the purse strings that, hey, guess what? You gave me $50,000, but guess what? They're already at $150,000, and all they're doing is playing around, and they're not getting anywhere. So do you want to cut that off, or you want to keep on paying?
And I think that also speaks to real skilled talent within the agencies and the challenges of getting these folks internally. And I guess I'll come back to Chris, because I believe, I may be mistaken, you also have the DHS AI Corps, which just successfully onboarded a whole bunch of folks for the talent surge we had. Is that right? Did you work with Michael, who's on the next panel, with that? And how did you find all these experts? What did you model this after?
Yeah, I think this is a great thing that DHS is doing. So part of my organization does include the DHS AI Corps. So this is 50 AI experts that we're hiring. It's the largest focused AI team in the federal government. It is eye-opening we've gotten over 14,000 resumes for 50 positions. So the word on the street is it's harder to get a job in the AI Corps than it is at Facebook, Amazon, AWS. And I don't know if that's true or not, but we are getting a lot of people from those organizations. And to me, it's not, the reason I share that is because I think it's really encouraging to think about how many people really want to take their amazing AI expertise and work in the public sector. And this is, in my opinion, it's a pivotal time for us in our history. I mean, I don't want to overplay it, but it's really a pivotal time where we can leverage this technology. I just read an article from Mark Cuban, and he said whoever wins the AI race is going to be, you know, the leader in the world. And I don't know why when I read it from him, I'm like, yeah, you know, he's actually. But anyway, but I really do think that it's a really important time for us, and we need expertise, and we can't just be and I know I'm sure a lot of you are affiliated with organizations that provide contractor support, which is great, and it's something that we need in the federal government. But we can't just be dependent on contractors. So the AI Corps, we've onboarded 25 people into the AI Corps, so we're halfway there as far as actually getting people on the ground, working on some amazing projects like supply chain resiliency. How can AI help us predict something that happens within the supply chain, like the Baltimore Bridge or something like that? We're working on some test and evaluation frameworks. I think it's really going to transform DHS. It's modeled after the U.S. Digital Service, which has been very successful in bringing in technical talent into the federal government.
And the U.S. Digital Service is under the White House, right? That was a executive officer of the president, maybe EOP or right. And
I'm calling Chris for his leftovers and see if I can.
14,000 leftovers, 14,350 or whatever. Chris, that is amazing. Who did source through all those 14,000 resumes? Like, did you use Gen AI or AI to go? I mean, I can't imagine an HR director going through that many. But first of all, very inspiring. That's incredible to know that so many people are passionate about work in government, especially in AI. And there are probably people in this room who would like to know more and how they can apply. And I think I might have a screenshot of that. It's no, you know what? I'm sorry, I've got it for the next panel, but we'll pull that up. It's ai.gov/apply. Is that right?
Yes, the announcements have closed, but Michael Boyce, who's part of my team, he can tell you all about it later and provide more details.
That is incredible news, fantastic. Yeah. And how are you handling do you have hiring issues at the other agencies, Mike or Vinay? Are you looking to bring on AI talent as well?
You know, our program offices and support offices, some of them already have data scientists in there. working with our human capital officer, and leveraging the great work that OPM, Department of Labor, others have done to accelerate this, we're looking to put that frame in. But again, we have to prioritize budgets, and so we're trying to, stretch our resources at this time. Yeah.
Got it. Mike, same?
Oh, yeah. The big problem for most organizations like mine is that we don't know what we need. And people are just trying to wing it. There's no AI expert that's within each of my modes. Well, some of them have AI experts, but being able to project what are the talents that we actually need. That's why I'm going to steal from you. What are the talents that we need? Where do we need to place them? There is a big difference between somebody who's like me, who's policy planning, compliance type person, and somebody who builds complicated neural network models, on the other end, versus somebody who's the infrastructure kind of person. So I'm trying to kind of group those three things in our mind as we're looking at them now, and then trying to figure out what those skills are, and then what advanced skills am I going to need? What do I contract out until I figure out what's actually needed, and then what stuff do I bring in-house to make sure I have that capability in-house.
You bet. Well, that's great. Start with Spence. I'm always fascinated by technology. We know what you did, what your set looks like now. What do you envision is the most important improvements you can start to deliver from LILT, or what can we expect next?
Yeah, I want to build off something both Mike and Chris said just a minute ago first, which is that I think that, Mike said AI isn't free. I think there's, one of the biggest challenges is people draw conclusions from consumer use cases to the complexity of enterprise environments. And we work with some of the largest companies in the world, and I can say that the federal operating environments are even more complicated than some of the we work with Walmart, for example, a very large organization. The federal operating environments are a lot more complicated, and fundamentally with these AI technologies, you're asking people to change the way that they work. And I think that there's a difference between, consumer use cases where you use ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever the case may be. I was like, oh, cool, I can do, new and interesting stuff with this, versus coming into my job on a daily basis and fundamentally changing the way I've worked for 20 or 30 years. Yeah. And that takes a lot of internal expertise, not just to develop models. I think it's not a technocentric or technocratic solution to say, oh, we have this technology now. There's actually a lot of workflow work that has to happen to operationalize these technologies. And I think it's really important to have people in the federal enterprise who understand not just the technology, but how people work, and then partner with organizations like us that we're like very focused on a narrow set of use cases, and we're quite good at helping people transition to a new way of working. And so I think that's this sort of last mile problem with AI, which is our experience has been that it's more than a mile. As far as what's coming next, I mean...
Yeah, maybe I should rephrase,
yeah.
Maybe not necessarily product improvements, but I think we were on long lines of maybe you could talk about some commercial use cases and overlap between commercial use cases and public sector.
Yeah, I think one of the ones that I'm most excited about, this is mostly in DoD, but using generative AI for information advantage use cases. So these are information operations. I think there's certainly Russia and China are using that against us. We should have the same capabilities pointed back the other direction. And then I think that citizen experience I'm also really excited about. We have, I guess it can be kind of a political issue, but we have people all over this country who don't speak English as a first language. And I think there's a lot of work that can be done to make the digital interface of the federal government more accessible to everybody, where we haven't, frankly, made a lot of progress. And it's been expensive to do so up until now, but now we have the technology to make the federal government and the information and tools that it has available to everybody. And I think our work with the Weather Service has been really inspiring, and I'm excited about some of the conversations we're having with DHS and other parts of the government where it's not just DoD IC use cases, but real information accessibility applications that I think are going to be transformational for society.
Yeah, stand-up meeting.
Dave, there's a nicer way to tell me I'm talking too much than that, all
All
right?
right, you're better than a hook, right? Come on. All right, Mike has agreed to forego his question. But I should say, too, on the note with Chris talking, we in the panel to follow, I think an incredible panel. The Chief AI Officer for the Office of Personnel Management, Guy Cavallo, is going to be on the call. And what he was saying is OPM has come out with all kinds of new guidance to increase the ability for us to not only attract but retain more folks. So things like not requiring college degrees, right? So now Bill Gates can actually apply to be to work as a government service agent. So I really think OPM is being very progressive about the policies to enable more people to be working and retained at the government. So let's
Dave, let me just I got to do one thing. John and I have a pet project, and I just need everybody to understand
John
that
at Booz Allen.
I'm sorry,
Booz.
John Larson.
Yes.
We have he really leads in this area. I'm just tagging along, but I just want everybody to understand that neurodiverse people are especially talented and have skills that other people do not have for this type of work. Yes. And we really need to go ahead and open up our minds and look for those types of people that can really excel in this area. And I just want to.
Yes, sir. You need to absolutely speak to Rajesh Anandan if you're not already. He's spoken at a number of my events, and I always bring him there because his neurodivergent. He's been placing neurodivergent talent at organizations, especially data and analytics. These folks are Rain Man, incredibly smart, and also make incredible additions to data analytics and other teams. Thank you for bringing that up, because that is near and dear to my heart, as my sister has trained autistic children and adults her entire life, and so Rajesh has got his heart in the right place in the things he's doing. So I'll make an intro to you and to John as well. Thank you. Sure. I appreciate that personally.
As long as we're on that, I'll give this out.
Sure.
Being an autism dad, I love it. Thank you. 3.5 million Americans, non-working neurodivergent Americans that want to work, and would love to work, and will come to work without the drama of typical employees that are not working.
That's right. And Rajesh has just launched a service where it's called a Teamex, because each of them has ways of communicating with people, and some are more communicative, some like to use email, some like to use chat, and he's built a Teams that it's called Teamex. It plugs right into Teams and other things, so that when you're dealing with your neurodivergent staff, you understand the kinds of responses you can expect from all the different people on different ends of the spectrum. You've got to check it out. He pitched it to me last week, and I'm going to pitch it to my audience. Just I'm not charging him as a sponsor or anything. I just feel really strongly about the work that he's doing. I can't believe you brought that up, sir.
Let me just jump in just for a second, because I need to be really clear about why this is important. AI ends every sentence with, because that's the way we've always done it, okay? So it's the human creativity, the ability to link things together that haven't been linked together before, the ability to see patterns where you couldn't see patterns in otherwise. We are all kind of limited in our ability to do that. Neurodivergent people are like supercharged in many of those areas. That is why we have to have them in this AI environment, in order to make those connections, because the AI agent isn't going to do it for us.
And they're incredibly talented. Wow, I can't believe is it on the same topic? Okay, Seth, please.
A lot of those people you're describing don't have typical education. And so,
Right.
especially in government, how would you get around hiring practices, filters? How do you get around all that to get those people into those roles?
I don't know. We got to get there.
You got to talk to Rajesh. He's a really beautiful man. Thank you so much, Seth, and thanks, Tuffer. Okay, Tanya. Tanya is the technology editor for LinkedIn News. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you. Hello. You gave me a massive promotion. You called me the editor-in-chief earlier. I did get a promotion, but not there yet.
I'll call your boss. Don't worry.
So I have a bunch of questions. The first one's kind of broad for everybody on the panel. You typically hear that the public sector is slower, and even on the private side, as far as AI is concerned, you keep hearing that people are in the POC stage, and the deploying is not happening as much. But hearing from a bunch of experiences you guys shared, seems like that's not the case. So how would you retort to people assuming on the industry side that the public sector is slower? The second question is for Chris specifically. How much of the applications that you mentioned 14,000, how much of it do you think is driven by this whole sort of trade war or innovation war with China? And we see that, we see a lot of sovereign AI come up, and companies work directly with governments all over the world, and how it's going to be a big asset moving forward. Is the government looking at it that way as well, kind of like an intelligence advantage? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'll take the second one. I know you asked Chris, but I'll just say that the way I talk about it is, and I think why the guidance came out when it did, and I know there's been several regulations for years before this, but the one that really makes this impactful is because this is a values to impact. The purpose of this guidance is to put in American values versus what other countries may be doing in those models or things that I talked about from bias, discrimination. Everyone views that differently. We need to make sure that we have American values embedded in that. So that's how I would mention.
Since we're talking about the second question, and specifically tied in, I don't know how that ties into the application, the number of applications and the interest that we've gotten, but I do think it's really important that in the public sector, especially at the federal level, that we have, that we're able to bring in the resources that can keep us at the forefront of this technology, and both to leverage it internally, but also to understand how it could be leveraged against us. At DHS, part of our mission is to protect critical infrastructure and provide security. DHS has an AI safety and security board that's made up of heads of some of the largest AI companies in the world, and I think that's really critical, again, to make sure that in this country that we understand what from a federal level, that we understand both the benefits and the risks of the technology. So.
No one wants to respond to the question about the public sector lagging the private sector?
I'll respond to that one too. I was waiting. But I'll say, I tell people in the private sector, so I write a weekly newsletter, and I focus on the public sector, state and local and international. So it's not just like, okay, in federal agencies, we're trying to figure out what's going on with AI and generative AI. It's across the world, and it's amazing. And I think it's an interesting place right now in the federal sector, is that we are leading, I think, in a lot of ways, not in every way, but in a lot of ways. And I read about what's happening at different companies, and I offer to help them if they want to catch up in some ways, because I really think that there are a lot of best practices that we have that we can share. But I think at the same time, I think it's really important to figure out who else is doing this well, and what are they learning, and how can we apply that? I think when you're in a position, whether you're in the private sector, and whether you're at Walmart or you're at Google or you're at Zillow, and you think you have it figured out, I think that's the problem. Because then I think you've got more risk, because you're going to sit back and say, no, we're ahead, and this landscape is changing rapidly. If you want to stay caught up, and if you want to actually be leading in this space, you need to have the right resources, you need to have the right focus, and I think you need to think very creatively, because this technology, it's surprising when you look at the use cases and you think about how can this technology be used. I think it's a matter of creativity in a lot of ways, not just, okay, how's it written, what's the language, it's how can you really apply this in a transformational way.
Yeah, I can say, I think that it's hard to say if public sector is slower than private sector. I think that in the last 2 years, the pace of change in the public sector has been very rapid. I mean, when speaking to legislators and appropriators, which I've been doing for a number of years now, suddenly, 3 years ago, we were trying to explain what language models were, and then a year and a half ago, they started asking about hyperparameter tuning. So it was just like really rapid change in people's, understanding and interest in these systems. I think the thing that, I'll just go back to the procurement challenge. I think if you look at the pace of innovation in this technology, is about every 6 months you get a new turn of the crank on these models. Or if you look at like a procurement cycle in the DoD, for example, where they're palming 2 or 3 years out, you've got you do the business case in 25 and then you're palming for 27, and you've got to somehow bridge that gap. That's just too long. So I think the rate at which the technology is advancing is much faster than the rate at which many of the procurement processes, which were set up for buying tanks or boots or whatever, that don't have the same pace of innovation. I think there's a lot of work happening, whether it's ATO reciprocity or providing various ways to do bridge funding to get around these lengthy procurement cycles. I think that's maybe the biggest challenge. And I think as far as the state of POCs or whatever we're in right now, I think that it really is about incentives. When people have a job to be done and AI is useful, and they have the right incentives to change the way that they work, then the adoption can be really, really fast. So, and I think there's lots of re-architecting of the way that people work, and that takes time. So I certainly think that the narrative around it, I live in Silicon Valley, the narrative is just, as a lifelong techno-optimist, I find it exhausting, sort of the narrative around AI right now. But I think that, we're sort of in the mode. I like the self-driving car analogy. It's 10 years ago, self-driving cars were right around the corner, and there was all this money piling into self-driving cars, and none of that, a lot of those companies didn't succeed. But now, 9, 10 years later, we have cars driving around in San Francisco. So I think the transformation over maybe even the 5-year period is going to be profound. But the narrative is definitely, out over its skis right now.
Fantastic. I know we have another question here. Yeah.
Thank you for a great panel. Paul Batkin, CAIO.
You got another mic, Sri, or mic?
It's better? There we go.
Thank you.
Yep. So I'm Paul Batkin with Skyward IT Solutions, and we do a lot of work with FEMA, with Department of Transportation across the federal space, mostly focused in digital services and close aligned to USDS. And my question is, with this AI transformation coming about, your focus on harboring talent internally within the organization versus focusing on industry partners and looking at large organizations and small organizations, kind of where are you seeing the landscape shaping in that?
So I think that's me. I think it's a matter of both. I don't think it's an either or. I think we're bringing in a large group of AI talent to help us across the department, but it's to partner also with consulting organizations or product firms or to be able to leverage the technology. So I think it's an all of the above, and how do we all work together to get to a point where we're supporting the mission and delivering value? Because that's the ultimate measure. It's how are we helping deliver the mission?
Fantastic. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. For me, it's very much the same as Chris. But I'm looking at what are the core foundational enterprise functionality that I need to have that's shared across the organization. That is my main focus for what's in-house. Then I have all my researchers and the leading edge and I need to try this out. I need to build this new thing over here where we don't know what's going on in here. That's where I need the contractors on being able to do that piece. That's where I need the vendor on being able to give me that professional services and get that thing up and running, because we just aren't going to be able to build that person in-house in order to make that happen. So I do think there is a place and an overlap for where that is on the continuum, but we need to figure out what that is. But I really do need the contractors on the leading edge of what it is that I'm doing.
I appreciate that, and that's kind of what we're seeing across the industry as well, is government providing more oversight and kind of steering the direction of it, with kind of more on the industry side performing the nuts and bolts and the technical driver factor of it. So thank you.
Sure.
Excellent. Well, I guess this will be forever known as the fire alarm panel. I can't believe we made it through that, and I can't thank you all enough for your service and for the time you spent here today. How about a nice warm round of applause for the fire alarm panel?